All right, so before exporting this into Unreal Engine 5, let me just add the label on this, right? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be adding the label, and for that, I'm going to have to basically separate a part out of this bottle, which I'm going to basically apply the label. So I'm just going to go into edit mode, and I'm going to be going to the face select mode, and I'm just going to be double clicking anywhere there so that we select this whole face loop, right? Now what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be pressing Shift D on our keyboard to duplicate this, right click to reset the position, and P to separate by selection. Now if I just tab out of edit mode, you're going to see that we have two, what do you call them? Two objects, right? So I'm just going to be going up. Let me just scale that up a tad bit. Just a tad bit, not more, because otherwise it's going to have that shadow visible. I think we did scale it up quite a lot. Let me scale it down a little bit. Yeah, so something like that. I think that should be good. I don't know. Actually, I think it's fine. Right. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be applying the label, and we're going to be using the same exact label which we did in the previous render. So I think it was this one right here. This one. Yeah. You can obviously create a more complex and a more good looking label if you want, but I think for us it just does the job. And so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to the shading tab, and I'm going to be selecting this label. Let me just go to this material preview mode for now so that we can see the materials. Right, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be selecting this label, create a new material, and now we can just simply drag that in. Just drag in this label and plug it into the base color. So right now you can see this texture is stretched, and the reason for that is because we haven't UV unwrapped this. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go back to my layout menu, and I'm just going to go to the front view, the front orthographic view. I'm going to press tab to go into edit mode, press A to select everything, U to UV unwrap, and I'm just going to be projecting this from view because we're looking at this render from the front and we don't really care how it looks from the back, right? So now you can just go back to the shading menu. You're going to see that it is a lot better. It is not stretched at least. And the reason why it's blur is because we have depth of field turned on. So I'm just going to turn that off because right now we don't really need it. Right, so you're going to see it looks pretty good now. Now you can just simply go to the UV editing tab. And if I just select everything, you're going to see that we can scale it up and we can position this wherever we want. I think something like that should be good. Right, so that does the job. Perfect. Now let's apply this exact same texture to this box as well. So I think it should be UV unwrapped. It should be already UV unwrapped. However, I don't think it is. Let me just go to the shading tab. Let's just go to the shading tab and let's apply a new material to this. Actually, instead of a new material, we can simply just apply this same exact material which we applied to this. So I'm just going to go here. Let me just call this label. Label 01. And I'm just going to be applying the label 01 material to this. Right, so this is already UV unwrapped. However, if it's not, then what you can simply do is you can press tab, A, U, and then smart UV project, or maybe unwrap. Right, so then it's going to work for you. All right, so that's perfectly fine, and it is applied properly. Now obviously it is not applying properly from the back because these faces are not UV unwrapped, but I think that's fine for us because obviously we're not looking at this render from the back, and so I think we should be good to go. The rest of the materials, we're going to be adding them inside of Unreal Engine 5. And so let me just go to the material preview mode. The only thing we needed to do here was to add these labels, right? So I think we're done with that. Now let's move on to Unreal Engine 5. So I'm just going to be exporting this from Blender. I'm just going to go to File, Export, FBX, and make sure that there is nothing in your scene which you don't want to export. Actually, I'm just going to get rid of this spot. That should be good. And I think everything else is fine. Now we might have to change this plant later on because the thing is that this plant, the way this plant worked was that it basically has those what do you call them? Those transparent textures, textures which have an alpha map. So since I don't know if the alpha maps are going to work in Unreal Engine 5, so because of that we might have to change this, but we can simply import some plants from Unreal Engine 5's Quixel Megascans library. So I think it should not be a problem. I'm just going to go to File, Export, FBX, and I'm just going to save it. Yeah, I think that's a right name. I'm just going to go to Models and Export. Right, so just give it a second, and I think it is done. So now I'm just going to be opening Unreal Engine 5, and we're going to create a new project. Actually, instead of creating a new project, I'm just simply going to go to an existing project, and I'm going to be creating another level in that. Alright, so I'm inside of Unreal Engine 5 and I just opened a pre-existing project. You can obviously create a new one if you want, but what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to File, New Level, and I'm just going to be creating a new empty level, Create, and I'm just going to save this, Control S to save it, and I'm just going to be naming it product underscore Wiz or SSO2, something like that. Right, you can name it whatever you want, obviously. So I'm just going to go to Content, right click, New Folder. I'm just going to be creating a new folder which I'm going to call product go2 or something like that. And now I can simply just browse over to where I had that exported. I think it was this one. So just drag that FBX into Unreal Engine 5 and press import all. Make sure that that skeletal mesh thing on the top, it was basically a setting in the pop-up menu that's not checked, because if it is, then it's not going to work properly. So I'm just going to be selecting all of them, and you can see that the textures have been imported, which is a good sign, which means that we have properly imported everything. So now you can see that if I just increase my camera speed to 3, you're going to see that the textures have been imported perfectly, right? So there is that. I think it looks pretty good, and I think that's fine too. Everything, the UVs of everything seem to be fine to me. Okay, so this is I mean, it's not a problem, but yeah, the UVs of this are not correct. If you were to add an actual texture to this, for example, like an image texture to this, then it would stretch. But I think it's fine for now. Yeah, so these plants, I don't think these plants are going to work that well, because we're going to have to find a texture which has a similar sort of an alpha map to the one which we had previously, which is a big hassle. So I'm just going to be using Megascans assets for this, which I think is a lot easier. So what I'm going to do for this is that I'm simply going to go to add. I think it's called create or add or whatever, and I'm going to be adding a cine camera actor. Right click this, pilot cine camera actor. Now I'm just going to place this somewhere here. I think the focal length and everything else is fine. The only thing which I'm going to be tweaking is the sensor width and the sensor height. I'm just going to be setting them both to the same value to get a square image. I think that should be fine, and that should be our frame for now. We can obviously tweak it later on if you want. And yeah, so let's begin with the lighting. So what I'm going to do for the lighting, first, by the way, just save your project and just press the save all button right here in the content browser, because we did import quite a lot of objects and it might take a bit to save. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to go to add, and I'm going to be adding a light, which is going to be a rect light for us. And I'm just going to get out of my camera for now, stop piloting, and I'm just going to be going up there, selecting this light, just bring it here, something like that. And I'm just going to be scaling it up firstly so that it affects the whole scene. Something like that should be enough. And then I can simply go ahead and increase the source width and the source height. So this is going to be our fill light, so it's going to be pretty large. Okay, so we are seeing a little bit of noise there, which I don't think should be a problem once we properly place our camera, properly place our lights. Hopefully. I'm just going to be rotating it a little bit like that. Maybe move it up a little bit, because this is our fill light, right? We don't want it to cause any harsh shadows. So now we're seeing this preview thing right here, and that's because it's this light is set to stationary. I'm just going to set it to movable, and now it's going to look pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be duplicating this light, but before that, let me just go inside the second viewport. If you don't have the second viewport, you can simply go to Window, and you can go to Viewports, and just check the second viewport in your, and it's going to appear right here, right? So I'm just going to be selecting this light. And so in this viewport, I'm just going to set this to the cine camera actor so that we can see what is actually going on and how our scene is going to look. And I'm just going to be placing the second light right here, right there. Now this light, with this light, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be I'm going to be reducing the intensity of this fill light to 5, because you do want some shadows, of course, not very harsh, but some. And I'm going to be reducing the size of this as well, just a tad bit. I think something like that should be fine, and maybe reduce it like that as well. Not too much though. I think that should be good. Okay, so now we can add a fill light on the top, so to sort of fill in the shadows. This is pretty similar to the previous one which we did. The lighting part is almost the same pretty much. And in most of your product visualization renders, it's going to be very similar. So yeah, there's not much to sort of discuss about that. Let me just move it down. This is just to sort of light up the background and to kind of fill in the shadows. If I just get rid of this, you're going to see that the background is going to become a little darker, but now it looks better because it's lit up. Right, so I'm just going to be, yeah, now I think we're done with the lighting. Now let's move on to the next step, which is going to be adding the textures. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go inside the Cine Camera Actor in our main viewport, and now we can start to add the textures. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be going to the automotive materials library, which we imported in our previous project. If you haven't imported it, you can just simply go to Epic Games Launcher, and from here you can just download that pack. So I'm just going to wait for it to open. So once Epic Games Launcher is opened, you can simply go to Unreal Engine and then Marketplace, and here you can search for automotive, and it should come up, automotive materials. Now these materials are created for cars, but I think they work pretty good for product visualization renders and even architecture visualization renders, so I use them a lot. And so just download this pack and just add it to your project. Just add to project and then just select whichever project you want to add it to. So once it is added, you're going to see this folder appear right here. And if I just go to the materials tab, the materials folder, I can simply go to interior, and there we have a lot of plastics, right? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be applying this plastic to this one. I think it looks pretty good. How about this one? I think that's better. And apart from that, you can apply this plastic silver to the cap. Now obviously if your colors are different, then you can simply tweak them using this tint option right here. You can just make them darker or brighter or have any color which you want. I think something like that should be good. And so this part is a little overexposed for now. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be reducing the intensity of all our lights from 8 to maybe 5. And this I'm going to reduce it to 3. Something like that should be good. And I think so this is, the whole render is a little blur right now. And the reason for that is because we have depth of field turned on. So I'm just going to turn it off for this render because there's not much to blur in the scene. And now we can add some marbles to the background, this part. Actually this is looking a little too dark, so I'm just going to be increasing the tint. Something like that should be good. Right, so there's that. And apart from that, let me just tweak this label as well. I'm just going to be opening this label material, and what we can do is that we can simply press 1 on our keyboard, just hold 1 on our keyboard, and I'm just going to be left clicking, which is going to create a value for us. And I'm just going to be plugging it into the roughness channel, and instead of 0, I'm just going to be setting it to 0.3 because that's going to add a little bit of roughness, but it's going to reduce some, and it's going to have just a slight bit of just a tad bit of reflections, which look really good, right? So there's that. And apart from that, now what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be adding a marble texture to these blocks. So for that, I'm just going to go to add and add Quixel content. Now we can just go to the Megascans library. I'm pretty sure you're aware of that. And then we can just import some stuff from there. So now I'm just going to go ahead and search for marble. And then you can just import any of these. Do you want? I think this one is nice. Taj Mahal granite, or maybe something like this, coffee marble. Let me just apply this coffee marble. Let's see how it looks. Okay, so it looks pretty good. However, one problem which I'm noticing right now is that the scale of this texture is pretty high. And so I'm just going to open the material, and I'm going to be clicking this tiling button right here. And I'm just going to be increasing the tiling to something like 3. Both of them. So the higher your tiling is, the more times your texture is going to be tiled on your object, which means that the higher your basically the higher your tiling value is, the smaller your texture is going to appear on your object. So that's exactly what we're looking for, right? And so this floor right here, I'm just going to be opening this material, and actually, you know what, let me just apply a plastic material to the floor as well, because that's going to make it look pretty good. How about this one? And let's apply it to the background as well. I think it looks pretty good. However, one thing which I am going to be doing is that I'm going to be making it maybe a little darker. Actually, no, maybe a little more saturated, something like that. I think that should be good. Yeah, and maybe you can like reduce the roughness. Roughness max, I'm just going to be bringing it down to something like that. I think that should be good. Yeah, so I think it looks pretty good. And right now we are inside. We're basically using the Lumen lighting setup. So and also I have ray tracing turned on, by the way. So if I just go to my project settings, edit project settings, and if I just search for ray tracing, you're gonna see that use hardware ray tracing when available is turned on. So if you don't have ray tracing turned on, I'm just gonna be turning it off right now to show you the difference. You're gonna see there's a slight bit of a difference in the shadows, although it's not that huge. But if you want some more, if you want better quality, then what I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to go to this lit. I'm just going to press this lit button right here, and I'm just going to be going to the path tracing menu. Now what this is going to do is that this is going to use path tracing. If you are familiar with render engines, path tracing is what Blender Cycles uses, and what render engines like Octane and stuff like that use. So yeah, path tracing is going to give you a little bit of some better results. However, it's not that necessary because the difference is not that huge. It is obviously the difference is pretty big. However, if you want a real-time render of this the scene, then obviously path tracing is not going to work for you. Then you're going to have to use the Lumen lighting setup. Otherwise, you can use path tracing if you just want to render out a single frame or something like that. Right. So now I'm just going to go back to Megascans, and I'm just going to be adding a plant. I'm just going to go here and let's just add 3D plants. Let's just go to 3D plants and something like maybe a simple garden plant. And I think something like this should be good. Nope. How about this? I think this should be good, yeah. So I'm just going to be adding this in my scene, and now we can just drag this in our scene like that. I'm just going to go to my second viewport, get out of my camera, and then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be placing it so that it gives us a pretty good effect. And I'm just going to be duplicating it by pressing Alt on my keyboard, and let's rotate it slightly, and let's move it down, something like that. And I think that looks pretty good. However, obviously we need to make it blur. So what I'm going to do for that is that I'm going to go to my outliner, Cine Camera Actor, and then we can simply go down and actually, where is it? Yeah, this focus method, I'm just going to set it to manual. And right now it's not that blur. And the reason for that is our aperture is pretty high. So I'm just going to set it to something like 1, which is going to make it pretty blur. However, what it's going to do is that it's going to make that scene, our whole scene blur as well. So I'm just going to have to tweak this. What do you call it? The focus distance, so that our scene is in focus. However, the plant is blur. Right, so that looks pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be selecting these plants, and I'm going to bring them closer to the camera to make them even more blur. Something like that should be good. Move it down, and yeah, I think that looks pretty good, right? Of course, you can spend more time with this, and you can tweak these plants a lot more to make them look even better. But I think right now they do the job pretty well. Maybe something like that. I'm just gonna rotate it. I think that, oops, my bad. I'm just gonna dock that back in. I think that looks pretty good, yeah. So I'm just gonna be leaving it at that. And our scene looks pretty good right now. You can obviously tweak this. You can obviously post-process this using a post-process volume. So I'm just gonna be adding, I'm just gonna go to add visual effects and post-process volume. And you can just search for contrast. So global contrast. I'm just gonna be increasing this to something like 1.3. Yeah, right now it's not affecting our scene because we don't have the infinite extent unbound checked. So if I just check that, it's going to affect the whole scene. And so if I just search contrast again, 1.3 is a lot. So 1.2, I think that should be fine. And we can maybe reduce the exposure a little bit. So I'm just going to go to exposure compensation. I'm just going to set it to -1. That's way too much. -0, -0.3 or something like that, maybe. Let's see what it does. Let me set it to 0 for now. -0.8. That's way too much. 0.8. Yeah, I think 0.8 is fine. right? So I think it looks pretty good. And this is going to be a render. I can just simply go ahead and press G on my keyboard, and I'm just going to switch to path tracing because I think that just gives you a little better results. Now another problem with path tracing is that your depth of field is not looking good right now. And so to fix that, what you can do is you can simply go to the post process volume, go down to path tracing settings, this path tracing right here, and then you can just turn on this reference depth of field. Now it's going to make our depth of field look pretty good. All right, so I think it looks pretty good, and our scene is ready to go. Once this bar completes, then you can simply go ahead and press these three lines right here, high resolution screenshot, and it's just going to save a render. And then you can just use that render. You can just post it on social media. You can edit that render, do whatever you want. And yeah, that's basically it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.